Hello and welcome to SciLux, the podcast where we talk about scientific developments and technological changes in Luxembourg, as usual powered by Research Luxembourg and straight from the studios of RTL City. And our guest today is Professor Gilbert Fridgen, Professor in Digital Financial Services and Papal FNR Pearl Chair at the SNT, the Interdisciplinary Center for Security, Reliability and Trust at the University of Luxembourg. Gilbert is the head of the Financial Services and Interorganizational Digital Transformations Research Group, FINATRAX. He analyzes the transformative effects of digital technologies on individual organizations, as well on the relationship between organizations. He thereby especially addresses potentially disruptive technologies like blockchain, DLT, artificial intelligence, and digital identities. Gilbert, thank you very much for coming today.
Thanks for inviting me.
I need to talk about the behind-the-scenes situation. I was so stressed about introducing you that I forgot to turn on your microphone. So we're kind of restarting for the listeners. And yes, I have to also comment on the thing that it's very difficult to say all these things. When people introduce you, it must be hard.
I know it. I have to do it myself occasionally.
And do you paraphrase sometimes, or you just go for all these, or just say FINATRAX, SNT, whatever. If people don't know, they don't know.
Usually I would say I would use the abbreviations. I mean, it's not, as a professor, you sometimes collect titles and that does not really make sense because nobody can use it. So
yeah, that's true. I also noticed that when I prepare for the interviews, there are a lot of titles, and it's actually sometimes even difficult for a person who's completely out of the field to understand which title is more important than the other. Because if you have really a big collection, it becomes tricky, right? Yeah.
It also depends a little bit on the environment where you're at. So
of course. And I think also that's why FNR is promoting this whole idea of narrative CVs,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
Because honestly, if you're not a specialist, you really don't know what is the most important. And it is impressive to see 10 pages of publications, but how do you know what was the most important, right?
Let's put it like this. Also, researchers might define for themselves what they consider most important. I think this is part of the freedom of research, that you can also say, okay, I want to contribute in this and that way to society.
That also comes to the idea of contributing to society that is so important in research. And I have a feeling that not every researcher remembers about that. So it's a good point that you said that. But we are actually not talking about this for now, at least, but more about your personal research, which is very important for society for sure. And we start with the definition. The definition I've been actually struggling with in the last couple of days or maybe even weeks. I've been watching videos, reading stories. Even on the way here, I found a podcast, and the podcast was, how to make you fall asleep. And there was this kind of a voice reading Wikipedia entries. And there was one about blockchain. I was thinking, this is not what I want. It has to be an interesting discussion and not the let's fall asleep. So I'm hoping you will do that today. What is blockchain?
So I totally understand that this is hard. Let's say, first of all, blockchain might sound a little bit like some cryptographic construct. And if you try to read about it, you will find even more terms and more definitions, how things are then composed and whatever. So what I usually try to do when I try to explain the concept to people is that I try to make a metaphor. And the metaphor is of some classical notebook. So not something not something technical, but actually a notebook made of paper. So now just imagine that each and every one of us would have one of these notebooks in their pocket. But this is not a usual notebook. This is a notebook in a Harry Potter style. So if one of us writes something into this notebook, it appears automatically in everyone else's notebook. And it cannot be altered by anyone afterwards. So not even by the person who added it to the notebook. That is basically what blockchain is. It's also called a distributed ledger. But basically you can imagine each participant holds one of these notebooks. And if anyone adds something to this notebook, it appears in everyone else's.
And that's DLT, right? Distributed ledger technology.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's different kinds of distributed ledger technologies. I would say blockchain is the most popular one at the moment. DLT is a more general term.
And then we also have to say that blockchain is not only about money, not only about cryptocurrencies.
Exactly. I mean, this notebook that I was just talking about, you can use it for multiple purposes. And I would say one of the most obvious use cases is using it to transfer money. Because I can easily write into this book that I transferred to somebody money, and then everybody else will know that this person that I transferred the money to has it. So this is the idea behind Bitcoin. So Bitcoin was the first technology that uses blockchain and that made blockchain also big as a concept, is to implement digital money on the blockchain. But you can use it for basically everything, where you say it might make sense to have this kind of distributed ledger where we share information and where we have, how it is called, a common truth. The point is this copying of content to all these notebooks means that everybody has the same notebook in front of them. So we have a common understanding about what is true, what is in this notebook. It's a little bit tricky because you can write basically anything in this notebook. So if I write a lie into this notebook, it does not become truth out of that. But truth is meant in a sense of we all agree that this book has the same content, although it is distributed among many participants.
And then why do we need this? Why can't we just stay with the system we have now? We have banks. It's working very well. You transfer money. Somebody gets the money. Why do we need, from the currency side, but also for any other, why do we need this technology?
That's what we try to figure out in our research. Let's put it like this.
So you don't know yourselves?
So let's say that the technology is there, first of all. And now the question is, what can you do about it? Where does it make sense? And I try to be a little bit hesitant in terms of where can we use it for example, for money? Does it really make sense? Does it add any value? I don't know. We will see. There's some pros, there's some cons, and we'll try to figure out which are more important. But there might be also other use cases. In general, let's say you can use it whenever you want to avoid some intermediary, some middleman. So where you say, okay, I need some third party to manage some process. And in the payment context, this is a banking system. So in the payment context, you try to take the banks basically out of the game, because you say we can do money transfer without involving a third party managing our accounts. But there might be other cases where you can use it. So one project that we are actually involved in for now, for a couple of years, is using it to manage e-government processes. So processes between different governmental entities. That means that different governmental bodies need to coordinate some process, but they want to avoid having some central overarching organization that manages this process. They just want to do this peer-to-peer, bilaterally between each other. And there, the technology can play a role. So to make an easy example, if governmental bodies across Europe need to manage some processes in between themselves, who would be, let's say this intermediary, the bank that takes the information from one of these governmental bodies and brings it to the next one? And you can think about this and you can say, yeah, well, where would you locate this? Well, you could say on a European level. So you need some European institution to do that. But this obviously creates some complexity. You need to create a European institution. Everybody needs to connect to this and so forth. So sometimes it might be easier if you would have some trustful infrastructure where you can say each governmental entity that is participating there can use this infrastructure. And then everybody else also knows that this is where this comes from and that this is some trustworthy source, but the different institutions can do it peer-to-peer. You do not need to create new institutions for that. And that's a little bit an area where this technology might make sense. And
it is also that idea of decentralizing it, right? What we are talking about decentralization is this idea that it's not one institution that owns this, but we have this process, as you said, to do that for us.
Exactly. I mean, this whole topic of centralization is also something that over the past decades, actually, in the IT area, was growing over and over. I mean, you just need to think about platform businesses. What is a platform business? A platform business is any large platform, large online platform that connects buyers and sellers, for example. So eBay, most of you probably know eBay, but for example, also Uber or even Booking.com, for example, they connect hotel guests and hotels. So it's one platform that basically only provides the service that people can interact with each other just because they provide this one point of contact for everyone. However, they do this and earn a lot of money. And the question is, is this really what we want? Is this really intended? And do we want to have this in any area? Or do we still want to be able to manage some processes bilaterally so that there might just be two parties involved and you do not need to go through a third party, through a platform that might earn a lot of money on the way?
That sounds very idealistic. I just have a feeling, I don't want to sound negative or, conspiracy theory, whatever. But, I know how the world works. There will be always a player who will want to own the process.
I agree. And this is what research is about. And this is also very important to me. Let's put it like this. I'm not a blockchain evangelist or whatever. There's people going around and saying, yeah, and this is going to solve all our problems. And in 5 years, everything will be on the blockchain and we will not have any platforms anymore. And I don't believe that. I believe that there is different mechanisms and different interests. And there's also sometimes, some slowness in an industry that will the world will not turn around top to bottom from one day or another just because there's a new technology out there. So the question that I'm asking, that we as a research group are trying to address is, what actual difference will a technology like this make? And where will it make a difference? Will there be areas where it actually makes sense for whatever reasons? And what would be the reasons? And what will be the drivers? And what other effects might this have? So maybe, just to mention one, maybe just to have the alternative to use something different than one of these platforms will already make the platform operator not to behave like a monopolist because they're afraid that people might move somewhere else.
That sounds really cool. And actually also on the forefront of everything, because I think generally blockchain technology and NFTs that we're going to discuss in a second and all that, it's also a bit controversial. I mean, doing research in that, I think you're kind of on a minefield sometimes, right? Because there's a lot of power involved and governments and money and financial industry. We're in Luxembourg. We have to mention that as well, right? So you're trying to find a new path that certain institutions could go or individuals.
Yeah.
And how do you start? I know that you're also looking in general at the future of financial industry and fintech in general too. So do you just check what is there on the market and then try to propose new solutions? How does the research go actually? Do you have preferences or think like, okay, blockchain would be good here because of something? How does it work?
It's always a mixture. So what you describe now in terms of blockchain might be good here. That's more of an explorative approach. So where you would say, okay, there is this technology, where could this make sense? Can we find something there? Can we talk to organizations or companies and ask them what they think and what their R&D departments or whatever think about this technology? So that would be more of an explorative approach. And that's part of our research indeed. What we also do is, and I think this is also important to understand about S&T. So S&T is very industry and impact driven. So we actively seek collaboration with industry. We go into partnerships with industry to make sure that the research we are doing will also make a difference, so that we do not just analyze what is happening and then write papers that other academics read, but that we actually try to help the companies to make something different and something better. So indeed, what we're doing is in this area, we're collaborating with industry partners, trying to figure out what this technology, distributed ledgers, or more broadly, decentralized finance means for a traditional company. Because indeed, it's perceived very controversially. So, and there's also some fraud going on in the sphere. And
wait, why fraud? You said it's absolutely safe and everything is like unalterable and all that. So why is there fraud?
Fraud doesn't have anything to do with the infrastructure, but just with the people making decisions. Let's put it like this. You can also do fraud on the traditional banking system. If you convince somebody to transfer money and you take the money and run away, then this is fraud. And basically, let's say this crypto area is characterized by a couple of features where I say, okay, the usability is not very high, so people tend to make mistakes. And at the same time, people believe that this is a place where you can get rich very easily and very quickly. And this is a mixture where you can easily convince people, and even people who consider themselves smart, or even people who might really be smart, you can convince them to do actions that will cost them money. And this is what has happened.
You mean the recent crisis?
Yeah.
Or there are many, actually. I think
there's not just one example. If you are doing research in this area, you're not surprised by anything anymore. I mean, there's just some easy schemes that you can use, and then there's also you need to say there's a lot of people who earned money very quickly and very easily just because the prices went up. So now they're millionaires and billionaires, and they believe that they are millionaires and billionaires because they are geniuses. And then they make mistakes because they are still human beings. And it was a little bit of luck also that they decided to buy Bitcoin 10 years ago. So there's a lot going on, let's put it like this. And I'm not so surprised by a lot. What's important to know is this basic infrastructure. This is still very, very safe in that sense. So nothing has happened on the Bitcoin itself in terms of manipulating transactions or whatever. The technical security is given, but the, let's say, convincing people to do stupid things, that's happening. Well, on the other hand, companies observe what is happening there and also observe how efficient things can go there. That some transactions, for example, might be a lot easier if you use a distributed ledger. And they wonder, why don't we do this in the traditional banking system, for example? Why don't we just utilize the technology to implement things that might make our daily work easier, quicker, more safe, more reliable, whatever. And this is then much harder to find out. And this is then also, let's say, part of the research that we're doing, that we're trying to help companies to answer this question.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I just remember I was at some conference, fintech conference, where one of the participants said like, oh, there's this hype about AI, but AI has been here forever. I mean, it's just that people don't use it and never called it this way. So, you know, in general, I mean, financial industry and innovation and all that, that's, you know, I'm very curious what's going to happen in the next couple of years, how far we're going to get with that. But I don't want to go this path because we would probably talk for another 20 minutes. I actually wanted to jump a little bit and mention something that is going to be also part of your pub quiz question. So I know you prepared something about NFTs, but before you ask about NFTs, I have to ask you what NFTs are and why are we mentioning them here as well?
Yeah. So Bitcoin, I guess all the listeners will already have heard about. And then after Bitcoin, there came a time where people basically copy and pasted the Bitcoin and created various different other coins. And some with additional features, but some basically really the same functionality. And this was not very successful. And then a couple of years later, people started to implement something new, which they called NFT, non-fungible token. And NFTs are characterized by their uniqueness. So the idea is that you can create some digital artifact that is unique, that you cannot in that sense, duplicate, which is in itself a little bit difficult because actually you can duplicate anything that is digital. So usually what you know as NFTs is, for example, some images, some JPEGs, just a picture. And you can obviously copy and paste. You can print any picture that is there digitally. However, what they say is basically just as you can own a coin, a Bitcoin, you can also record some ownership of these NFTs. And then people started collecting NFTs, for example. So they said, okay, we are going to create some crazy JPEG images and store them somewhere. And on the blockchain, on the Ethereum blockchain, so the second largest blockchain behind Bitcoin, we're going to store on the Ethereum blockchain some, let's say, proof of ownership so that this picture belongs to me and some functionality so we can trade it. I can sell it to other people. And in this way, they created, let's say, a new form of collectible. So you can collect, you can buy and sell these digital artifacts.
It's ingenious in some way. I mean, I would have never thought of it as something that is going to make people spend millions, but it is happening. Millions, billions. Amazing, right? But before we continue talking about the NFTs, could you actually ask the question we prepared for our listeners regarding that?
Yes. The hype around NFTs peaked last year. How many of these NFTs were traded more than once?
Okay, great. I don't know. I mean, I do, as usual, because the guests normally share the answers with me as well, but I did not know earlier. So please listen until the end. Remember, that's when we will answer the question. But coming back to the NFTs. So one of the things I recently discovered is that it's also videos, and that NBA, for example, jumped on the bandwagon, and they're just like, I don't know, sharing the videos of the most spectacular slam dunks or whatever. And then my question is, okay, yes, so I own this. And what does it give to me except for owning? It's not a question of copyright.
Yeah. So why does it? What does it give you to own a nice handbag?
Yeah, but then I go and show it around maybe, and I feel better about myself. I don't know. I don't have really nice handbags, so maybe a pair of shoes would be better. I don't know. Yeah, book. That's me more. But books are not so, fashionable. If I show a book to someone, nobody will be so impressed, I think.
So a couple of years ago already, Twitter enabled the feature that people can show their NFT as their profile picture.
Ah.
So if you own one of the NFTs that have a special format, follow a special protocol, you can use it as your profile picture on Twitter, and you can, in that sense, show that you own one of these NFTs. So that's one thing. People want to show off.
Yeah.
And you give
I just wonder what's going to happen if Twitter goes down. Then where will they show it? Sorry, I'm not saying anything.
Yeah. The second question is, or the second topic, what they're doing. So there have been some NFTs that basically also have some utility in terms of they are an entrance ticket to a club. Ah. So there is, for example, the Bored Ape Yacht Club. And if you own one of these NFTs, you are invited to some special events, let's say high society in that sense. So I was never in one of these events, but I can imagine that these are events of people who got rich with crypto, who then bought one of these NFTs, and who are then now able to attend some party in New York on the top of some skyscraper or whatever. So it gives them value in that sense. So this is the second reason why people own these NFTs. And the third thing is, if you're talking about NBA, for example, sports clubs have been issuing some collectible cards or whatever since decades, physically. And now they are only doing it virtually. As much as you did not show around your physical NBA collectible cards in the last decades, you're just happy to have them. And now you are happy to have some NFTs. So this is also why some of these sports clubs or companies had the idea of doing that.
So before we go into more detail for the technology, because I think we jumped a lot about, applications and all that, and I just still want to understand a little bit the blockchain thing. I also have one more question. Our previous episode, so the one before this one we're recording today, I talked to Christoph Ley from the University of Luxembourg as well. He's a statistician. One of the research fields is sports and, statistics and all that. And I, of course, asked him, do you bet? Right? Mm-hmm. I had to. So I have to ask you as well. You said you did not go to those parties, so I assume you don't own the, very expensive NFTs. But what about Bitcoin?
So I never invested into NFTs because I did not understand it. I bought
You're too late.
I bought some cryptocurrencies.
Ah, okay.
Some couple of years ago, but not
for research, I assume, right? That's what the researchers always say. It was just for research.
I was observing at that time. I was observing the price going up, and I was wondering why I didn't buy it. Although I've been doing research for 2 years or so. So I bought some crypto, but unfortunately not enough. I still have to work. So
I guess maybe that also is, fueling your research in certain areas to understand what's going to happen. But I guess it's more about, too deep in. It's not so much about price fluctuation as such in that particular situation. Okay, I wanted to ask you, because what I don't understand is how it really works. So, okay, I get this magical notebook. We are just writing in things, and it's not possible to alternate it. So it becomes very secure. But then what I don't understand is kind of a technology of linking the notebooks. So what is there? What is it an algorithm that is doing that?
That's actually, it's not very complicated. First of all, the linking is not, let's say, copying information from one notebook to another is not very complicated, because this is basically the peer-to-peer algorithms that a couple of years ago we used to share music and videos. So
legally, right?
that's basically just the same algorithms now used for that purpose. The tricky part is making sure that all the notebooks are identical. And this is where you have to use the so-called consensus mechanisms. And so these consensus mechanisms, they try to make sure that each notebook has the same content. And they try to use certain mechanisms to ensure that. The mechanism that is most criticized is the one that Bitcoin uses, because there you basically force some people to, not force them, you give them an incentive actually to do very hard calculations to make sure that these notebooks are synchronized, to do very hard calculations, and you reward them then in Bitcoin. So they get new Bitcoin, actually newly created Bitcoin from that. But these calculations are very energy intensive. So this is also why the Bitcoin network is very energy intensive.
And that's also another problem, the whole energy situation, right? Because from what I understood is we kind of don't tend to think of that, but it's a lot of energy that we need for mining Bitcoin.
For Bitcoin.
And NFT too, of course. That's less?
Exactly. So that's the interesting part of it, and also interesting in terms of research. So Bitcoin uses the so-called proof of work consensus mechanism. So basically...
The criticized one, you said.
The criticized one. Proof of work means that you need to do computational work that is very energy intensive. And therefore, in my opinion, Bitcoin uses too much energy. But there's two aspects. So first of all, you need to be fair when you compare payment systems. And if you look at the banking system, you cannot just say, okay, Bitcoin uses this and that amount of energy, and a bank transaction only uses a few kilowatt hours because it's just some computer sending some bits and bytes over the internet. If you're fair, you would also have to say, yeah, but there's two banks. There's people working at these banks. There's people driving cars to work in these banks. So it's not that easy. The second thing is that there's other consensus mechanisms as well. NFTs are not on the Bitcoin network. Most of the NFTs are on the Ethereum blockchain. Ethereum used to use proof of work as well, but a couple of months ago, they switched to another consensus mechanism, proof of stake. And in proof of stake, what you do is you're basically using existing Ether, so the cryptocurrency on the Ethereum blockchain, you're using existing Ether to ensure that nobody makes anything fraudulent or whatever. So it does not use these calculations anymore, but it uses existing capital. You're basically ensuring by providing capital that nobody can do. You would lose it if you would try to do something fraudulent. So this is a new approach. This approach is highly discussed at the moment because on the one hand, it saves a lot of energy. And Ethereum now is on a level that is not much higher than usual company networks, usual internet. On the other hand, within Ethereum, you're now rewarding people who already have a lot of money. And so people criticize about Ethereum that people who have a lot of money will even be able to earn more money on Ethereum, which is also not really in the long run in society, it's not where we want to go. So you see, all of these mechanisms have their pros and cons, and this is what we also try to figure out in our research. So how bad are these effects? What can you do about them? How can you mitigate negative effects and so forth?
Or maybe find some other proof of something.
Exactly.
A third way.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there another way, or these are just the two main ones?
There's different ways. So for example, say also coming back to this governmental example that I made, if you do not have one of these public blockchains, so a public blockchain is a blockchain where basically everybody can participate. If you want to participate in Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, you can just download some software and do it. And just as a warning for the listeners, if you download now a Bitcoin node and start mining, don't expect to mine or Bitcoin in the next couple of thousand years because you're competing against many others. And if you do not have a lot of computational power, it will be hard for you.
So this is the same. You have to have money to have computational power,
so
right?
That's a counter criticism.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. That's a counter criticism. But so that's a public blockchain. But obviously, if you would build such a governmental system, what they use is a so-called private blockchain. And in a private blockchain, you have previously trusted parties.
Previously?
No, it means that you know each
confirmed
other.
Already in some way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you know each other up front. So you would, for example, say this page is signed by this governmental body in Germany. This one is signed by this governmental body in Spain. The next page is signed by this. And you can reach a consensus without having some complex mechanism because you know all the participants. So this is also one of the options, which is obviously much, much less energy intensive and also rather comparable to usual IT systems.
And you said IT systems, so I wanted to move a little bit away from blockchain and just when I was preparing again a bit of background story for our discussion today, and this is recently a huge problem for me. I start reading exactly all the descriptions, what you do, and it's so much interdisciplinarity and so many different subjects. It's difficult to understand. Okay, but why this and this and this and that? I mean, it doesn't seem to add up that much. So somehow I understand. Okay, for enough. DLT, blockchain, yes. Energy, I guess, also a bit related to that.
Yeah.
But then you also have other stuff that you look at, if I can call it stuff. Sorry, probably this is not a nice word to use. Yeah. So what is it and how does it all come together?
So let's put it like this. My background is interdisciplinary. So I have a background in management as well as in computer science. To put pointedly, in computer science, you work a lot on algorithms, but you do not necessarily have the understanding about the immediate business needs or the immediate economic impact of the technology. And if you look into management or economics, you look on business needs and an economic impact, but you do not necessarily have a deep understanding of the technology. So the research field where I come from tries to combine these two areas. That means that usually I'm not the one to develop the next consensus mechanism. This is done by computer scientists. They are much more capable of doing that. And I'm not necessarily the one who perfectly can understand every impact economically of something. But I'm the one that has enough understanding of a technology to make a realistic assessment about what this technology might mean economically. So really combining these two perspectives. Now, if you have this interdisciplinary perspective, let's say that's the competence in itself. And this competence you can then apply to basically any pair of industry and technology. So let's say making an understanding what a certain technology does to a certain industry, that's part of my discipline. Technologies that I'm focusing on most of them have something to do with decentralization because I just find this topic interesting, going away from these more concentrated platforms, markets, whatever. And that's already some economic term, markets, concentrated monopolies and things like this. So I look at decentralization technology and look at certain sectors where I see a lot of development at the moment. And this financial sector, this is the energy sector, and this is the governmental sector.
Governmental sector doing decentralization? Wait, how? I mean, it's rather...
It's decentralized anyway, but it still has some things to do in terms of technology. Let's put it like this.
Okay.
I to put pointedly, all the logic that institutions in Europe are doing, I mean, you could perfectly develop one centralized system, one large IT system that manages everything that citizens in Europe would want to do. But I guess you might consider this a little bit dystopian.
Yes.
And it's not only dystopian, it's even against constitutions, it's against the law. But this makes, let's say, governmental processes comparatively hard to support by IT in comparison to what companies can be doing. Because if some company like Meta, Facebook and Instagram, if some company of Meta rolls out a platform for every citizen on the world, for some reason, nobody finds this dystopian. But for a government in Europe, everybody would find this dystopian. So it's also more complex to implement. But with these new technologies, these decentralization technologies, we try to help governments to, let's say, make use of the benefits of digitalization without creating some dystopian centralized system.
And is that what the Flora project was about?
Exactly, yeah. So the Flora project is a project that I've been doing now for a couple of years. Before I came to Luxembourg, I was in Germany. And at some point, I was approached by the German Federal Office for Migration and Refugees, basically on getting support for managing the asylum process within Germany. Just for you to understand how complex this is, so there's 30 different kinds of institutions involved in the asylum process. I mean, just to give an idea, this can be health checkups, employment, finding out about the identity and things like this. So there's many different types of organization, of governmental organizations involved in such a process. And Germany is also a federal country. There is the same organizations in every state and sometimes even in every small city. So you have a lot of different governmental institutions working on the same process. However, centralizing this whole process is in Germany even forbidden by constitution, because it would give one organization too much knowledge about one individual person. So it's even forbidden by constitution, which resulted in processes that would say, okay, and then one institution really takes a phone call or whatever, sends Excel spreadsheets. And these processes obviously are error prone and they are slow. And so they try to find better ways of doing this. And they have been building some prototypes. And in the meantime, so I was also involved in European blockchain services infrastructure. In the meantime, the European Union has also picked up on the topic of asylum processes, let's say, to use this technology to improve cross-country processes also within the European Union. So that these things are, less error-prone, more efficient, and also more secure in that sense.
And would that mean that there will be just like one European Union system for this particular thing? Or how does it work? Because we are trying to decentralize, and then what exactly happens?
So decentralization there means that it's just like coming back to this Bitcoin example. There's no Bitcoin institution that runs the system. But this is just, let's say, you could call it some common standard, where you would say every European governmental entity who needs to participate in this process has access to this common system but that is not run centrally, but that is basically run in a peer-to-peer manner. So they can then just interact. Some German, some Luxembourgish, some Spanish governmental entity could then interact over the system just by following the standards. And the only thing that you would need to do as a member country is that you somehow pre-register your institutions so that nobody else has access, obviously, to the system.
But that's still a long way to go, I assume.
The European blockchain services infrastructure is actually being developed already quite far as an infrastructure. This use case might take a couple of years. And then, let's say, one feature of this is also that it needs to be adopted actively. So each institution can make the decision individually if they would like to participate in this or not. And obviously, then it will be an interesting question if many will adopt this. If they see more benefits, then they see problems with that. But that's interesting research for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking, how can you be so excited about decentralization? Because for me, it's like the more you describe it, the more I'm like, let's just get them all together, get this governing body, and we decide for people rather than the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. But then this creates some dystopian system then. I mean, you obviously can centralize anything. You just need to look into some other countries. If you have all data in one system about every citizen, and you create scoring for every citizen if they behave correctly or not.
We know that very well from some countries, right?
I mean, this is nothing that you want to have. So we have a way of living in Europe that's different to the ways of living we have in most of the rest of the world. So I think it's important that we try to build IT that supports our way of living, and that we do not adopt IT from other countries that are basically built upon their way of living.
Yeah, we also touch upon the privacy issues as such, which is also very important in that discussion, I guess. But we are based in Luxembourg, and I kind of started going that direction, then I changed. I want to go back. We are in Kirchberg, so all the financial institutions here, all the banks, and whatever, do they like you or not? Because, it's like you're kind of telling them, okay, yeah, guys, pack, go away.
No, let's put it like this. I've been already a couple of years ago, when the first blockchain, Bitcoin, whatever hype was on, press also asked me in terms of next year, we'll all pay in Bitcoin. Do we even need the banking system anymore? And I'm 100% sure that we will need the banking system in the future, because banking is much more than payments, for example.
But in Luxembourg, we mainly have, transfer agencies, if I may, right? That's why I'm asking.
Let's put it like this. What I would do in the financial services sector is I would have a close look into all of my processes, and I would try to figure out if you can make things easier, cheaper, quicker when you adopt a new technology. And also you cannot say, oh, we hate this guy because he brings this new technology or whatever. This technology is going to come. And we are in a globalized world. So if companies do not adopt something quickly enough and slower than their competitors, they will just lose in the long run.
Like you did because you didn't buy NFTs.
If you're too slow, it's your own problem. So indeed, it's rather that I discuss with them how they could make use of this technology to improve their daily work, their processes, or even do something that might be considered disruptive, so that it really brings them some new business. So there's these two aspects: making things they do anyway, making them more efficient, or create new business.
Before we finish and solve the pop quiz question, because we will have to soon wrap up, I just wanted to ask you about one more thing, because big industries like financial industry that we both agree are pretty slow. I also personally think that, research is not the fastest, right? At least that's what I think. So sorry if you think differently. How do you actually match disruption and research? Like, this was always very interesting for me in the sense, like, how do you research disruption? Because you do look, at disruptive technologies, right?
Yeah. I mean, let's put it like this. The reason why you might have the perception that research is slow is that research tries to make statements that stay. Let's put it like this. So research is oftentimes more careful. When I was talking about blockchain evangelists or whatever, I mean, there's evangelists for any technology. They go around, there's not something new coming up, and then they're on social media and giving talks and whatever, and presenting that this will change the world. And sometimes they might even be right. However, this is not what researchers want to do. Research want to find the truth. So that's the aim of research. And this might take a while, because you might be able to do some, let's say, first conceptual guesses in terms of, okay, we have this body of knowledge, this theory, now this technology, is it comparable to something we had in the past? And you can make some first guesses. But this is, I mean, even the sentence, as I said, it might have bored you. It's not really like comparable to somebody who say, yeah, this is going to change the whole world. In the long run, however, when there's more data, let's say research can make sure that we as humankind know what we are doing. And this is why what research is often about. So now what we try to do there is just not to forget there's a third important. And this is research that is so much in the future that you just do not understand it yet. So very, very fundamental research. The GPS systems wouldn't have been there without the relativity theory. But at the time when Einstein invented the relativity theory, he did not think about GPS. Let's put it like this. So what we try to do is when we go out, when we collaborate with industry, we try to learn what is relevant now and in the next couple of years. We'll still publish what we think is now secured. So where we can say this is something that we can trust in the long run as humankind. But my team members and I, when we go to the companies, the PhD candidates or the postdocs, when we go to the companies, we also try to help them right away. So this is indeed also important for me personally, because as I said initially, I like impact. So I also like to see some immediate effect of what I'm doing. And also at the same time, it ensures that I learn what is really relevant and that I do not do research in the ivory tower that will never make a difference.
Yeah, because I was thinking, you just write some paper about the new disruptive technology. When it's published, the technology is not there anymore. So that would be a bit of a sad story. It
happens, but let's put it like this. I made some jokes about this a couple of years ago because there were papers published about Second Life. Yeah. So Second Life was a very short hype, I think, around
and among scientists at certain moment. I don't know why, but it was pretty popular among scientists.
There was 1 or 2 years when there was a lot of papers on Second Life. And you can make fun of this now, but at the same time, we're discussing 3D virtual worlds again. We just now call it metaverse.
Yeah.
And maybe this research that they've been doing has relevance now. So if you do metaverse research, if one of my PhD candidates says, I want to do research on metaverse, I would say, have a look at the Second Life publications that have been there, what they found, what they built. So this is important also. It's knowledge that we gain as humankind.
Yeah, that's a very good point. But yes, knowledge as we gained as a humankind is also the knowledge about NFTs and the question. So we're going back to that. So please, can you remind the listeners what the question was and then tell us what the answer is?
The question was, how many of the NFTs were traded more than once?
And the answer?
And the answer is, so altogether, there is around 14 million NFTs on the Ethereum platform. More than once, 31% have been traded more than once, actually. But only around 11.5% have been traded more than twice. You could also say 70% have only been traded more than once. And only 1 out of 10, roughly, is really traded on a regular basis, or at least more than twice.
So people buy,
this is not that much,
and then they own, and then they're happy.
They are just sitting on it because they are hoping that the price will go up.
From your research, can you say that this is a good approach, or you're not looking at it from that perspective at all?
In terms of buying and sitting on it, for NFTs, I don't believe it's a good approach because what we are indeed looking also into is if an NFT has been sitting around for a couple of years, it's unlikely that suddenly people will hype it. Let's put it like that. Why should they? It's rather a couple of NFTs like the one that I mentioned before that also have this utility that it gives you access to a club that people will use it. So I personally see the future of NFTs somewhat differently and not only in this collectible area, but this is what time will tell.
Yes, and hopefully we will meet again in a couple of years' time, still in Luxembourg, to talk about what time told us, whether metaverse is the second life or not, or maybe some other things just appeared, NFTs or whatever other possibilities blockchain technology brings us. But for today, thank you very much, Gilbert, for coming and sharing your knowledge with us.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Okay, and this is it for today. As usual, don't forget to subscribe, to follow us, rate us, check what we're writing on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and actually we started Instagram as well. So if ever you are there, you can also check what is happening. And this was Silux, powered by Research Luxembourg, and my name is Hanna Siemaszko.